Hello and welcome everybody to the NDTV Grunt Force Mission Energy sessions on this World Environment Day. We do want to make energy efficiency the real buzzword. This campaign over the last few months, we've been focusing on the need for everyone to act now if India is really to become energy secure, and that's obviously one of our biggest problems. So we've been highlighting issues and interventions in the field of energy efficiency. We've been trying to make a difference on the ground as well by demonstrating how each and every one of us has the power with our Mission Energy Challenge here. We've got 100 contenders, 4 categories, working towards reducing their energy consumption over 2 months and figuring out how they can actually benefit by the savings. The idea being that each and every person at their individual level can take positive actions. Now, we're very happy to all of our partners, Grunt Force, Knowledge Partner, CII, Content Partner, TERI, Energy Efficiency Partners, Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, AEE as well, for helping implement these campaign initiatives and increase the reach of the campaign and provide invaluable expertise over these sessions. Now today, 3 sessions, we're aiming to discuss and highlight various aspects of energy efficiency such as policies and recommendations and innovations, intelligent ideas that each and every one of us again can start to implement. And we hope to crack the energy code in this first session and understand how we can take energy from a cost to being an asset. Now, we are fortunate to have an absolutely fantastic panel, and we also have some really esteemed guests here in the audience as well, whom I am going to be continuing to turn to and get takes from. The idea is that let's see if after the next hour or so, we can actually come up with some of the suggestions. We do have a new government. We have a government which has already come in and said we would like to take major initiatives in these areas such as energy. We've got now a collective, unified ministry in a sense. Lots of changes happening. Can we help guide those changes and put forward some of the specific recommendations that can then be an asset? So that's what we're going to try and do. So let me dive straight into it by welcoming, well, as I said, it's an absolutely fantastic panel. Naina Lal Kidwai, Executive Director, Country Head HSBC, former President FICCI. Thanks so much, Naina, as always, for being with us. Saurabh Kumar, Managing Director of Energy Efficiency Services. We'll also talk about some of the financing that could perhaps help in all of this. Money is always important. N.K. Ranganathan, a Managing Director of Grunt Force, is one of our partners in this entire initiative, so thanks a lot for being with us. Krishnan Dhawan, CEO of Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. We'll be looking forward to getting some of your insights. Miriam Ahmedad, Director, Sustainable Habitat Division at TERI. We have Chandra Bhushan, who's DG at CSE. Great to have you with us again. And Biroz Ghazlar is the Head Sustainability at Mahindra & Mahindra. So what would be some of the basic things that you would look at? Then why don't I start with you and I'll get opening comments from everyone.
Well, first and foremost, it has to be about pricing energy right, because what you get is through subsidies, a true distortion of what the right price of energy is. And what that does, therefore, is remove into the equation the less polluting energy sources, wind and solar, which on the face of it look more expensive than other energy sources. So if we can get that pricing right, we know exactly what the cost of that supply is. It brings...
So this is basically goes back to essential microeconomics, which says that there's a public cost to having polluting energy like coal or others, and wind and solar.
And remove the subsidies so that you can actually see the true price of delivery, so that you can get the less conventional sources into the equation. The other is just the technology through which we supply that. And there are, I believe, 14 experiments going on right now for smart grids. And smart grids will help in terms of absorbing some of the non-conventional energy into the equation. So we do need to go down that track to make sure that we can pull in what is wind and solar, and India has big advantages in both, into the supply equation.
I have just a couple of things, just an opening. Number one, we have focused on supply side for the last 60 years. There is now time to look at demand side. And I think that is the first recommendation that I would make to the new government. Number two, talking about energy efficiency, the biggest problem of energy efficiency is monetizing energy efficiency. And that is what leads to financing issues, the attractiveness for investments. So these are 2 basic things that the government needs to focus on.
Can I just understand, when you say look at the demand side, are you saying reduce demand, control demand, or do you mean remove inefficiencies?
No. Yeah, remove inefficiencies, and without having any recourse on the delivery. The delivery actually improves, whether it is lighting or buildings or industry. You invest that cost and you get paid through the savings over a period of time. The fact is, there have been pilots, there have been successful demonstrations. It now needs to be scaled up.
I would say the first thing is to break it down. There's no dearth of policies, no dearth of initiatives from the government side. There's no dearth of money. The question is, have we implemented it? Fortunately, the new government is talking of implementation on the ground. If we just start implementing it, and I would agree with Saurabh there, demand-side management is perhaps one-third as expensive as sort of building generation capacity.
When you're saying demand-side management, everyone immediately assumes that, oh my God, here these guys are, they're doing an environment program, they're talking about energy, and they're saying, don't use air conditioners, don't use fans, don't use anything, go back to the Stone Ages. That's not what you're saying. You're saying streamline how, get rid of the wastage in the system. Is that what you're saying?
Very simple. We need more power. We will consume more power. We will consume more energy. Nana said there are various ways of getting this energy and make renewable sources viable. It today is compared to diesel, where the power cuts we're using diesel. Nobody says cut off everything. The hassle today that the demand on energy is not going up just because of lights. There are air conditioners even in juggi-jhoppadis. So you cannot stop people from using them. The question is, are we having efficient products so that we don't really have to waste the energy that we are producing?
All right.
There's two areas of focus. One is to change behavior, and issues like demand-side management are essentially attempts to educate both consumers and industry and the distribution companies that you can actually change behavior without having the sort of impact you're apprehending. There are focus areas on how industry manufactures, how appliances are designed, how buildings are designed, which I think is really important, and how our automotive sector is designed from a fuel efficiency point of view. So both from a equipment point of view, if you will, and from a usage pattern point of view, I think there's a lot of change that is possible and is waiting to happen.
And there seems to be a thrust from the new government on renewables and solar in particular. Is that really something that is going to take off? At the end of the day, will that pricing issue always kick in, that solar is more expensive than anything else?
Yes, I think renewables will take off, and but pricing is one of the key issues, and particularly if you're talking about building integration of renewable energy systems, then firstly we have to look at demand side management in order to make renewable energy supplies, more economically viable. So, but there are a lot of implementation issues we need to look at, and when we go to field, this is something that we face day in and day out, that people's understanding of incorporating demand side response systems, renewable energy integration is very limited. So, awareness, education within colleges, within all domains is very critical. And I think one thing is very important is changing mindsets of people. I mean, we are also in a particular location, if I can draw some, sort of examples. If you really look at demand side response and management, all hotels, hospitality sector should respond to that positively. Just to give you a simple example, you can have a reduced set point of temperature, and that will help you to save a lot of energy rather than, wearing suits and not responding to the climate of the place here. So there are certain things that you need to look at.
I think that is such a good point that I'm almost tempted to ask everyone on the panel, let's throw off the coats and...
So let's have some of,
Although you will be, what you will be very happy to know is that the new technology that we at least have instituted with the lights that we are using on sets like this, these are new technology lights, much cooler, and actually we have seen in our country alone, the electricity consumption has gone down by 20% just by changing the lights. So what you're saying is absolutely correct.
So I think it's important to walk the talk and change mindsets of people. That will drive efficiency automatically.
Okay.
Let's go back to the basics. We have about 300 million people, equal to the population of the United States, who don't have access to electricity. They have not seen electric bulb in their life. We have 800 million people who cook food on biomass, and that has huge health implications for the health of women. So if you want to crack energy code, the first priority has to be energy access. This country can't live in darkness. Okay? We want to become a developed country, and therefore we must ensure that basic energy is provided to everyone. The second thing I would like to address is that if you want to address energy efficiency, if you want to address renewable energy, we must have an integrated view of energy, which will mean that whichever energy is cheapest, whichever energy is sustainable will get the priority. right now subsidies are given simply because we have sectoral view on energy.
So let me, three of you have talked about subsidies, and I just want to dive straight into that particular point also before I come to Biroz. At the end of the day, when you talk about phasing away the subsidies, when it's okay, let's not subsidize diesel or let's not subsidize LPG, it often becomes a major political hot potato. Although, as you said, the real poorest of the poor are not getting that subsidy.
Yes.
They, on the other hand, are quite often having to rely on really expensive forms of energy consumption. I mean, even just collecting the wood or using stoves or some of the micro forms of getting energy are actually more expensive than what the rich are doing. So those subsidies, in many cases, are actually going to the rich and the middle classes.
Yes, of course.
You agree with that?
Absolutely. In fact, the rich of India takes the subsidy of the poor. Okay, whether it is LPG or diesel, for example. The most expensive car in this country runs on the most subsidized fuel. A lot of people in this country cannot afford energy, and you will have to have certain support mechanism for them. But in general, right now subsidies goes to the rich and those who can afford it, not to those who need it.
Okay, Mr. Ranganath, before I come in, let me just get you in on that then. Do those subsidies also, we were talking about the demand side of it, do those subsidies also distort demand therefore? I mean, if the subsidies were not there and diesel prices and petrol prices were even higher than they are right now, maybe there'd be a bigger push to energy efficient cars and, you know, public transport and all of that.
If you are going to get the country on par and if everybody has to have energy access, then obviously this is the way to go, because it's not only in energy, it's also in water. The rich don't pay anything for water, but the poor do. So there is a certain system which is actually creating a greater sort of divide than kind of making these basic things accessible to everybody.
Okay, Mr. Ranganath, let me just get in on this, because I think we are arriving at the first of the sort of policy points or suggestions or whatever that we were driving at. Re-looking at the way we are providing subsidies and re-looking at just the mindset change. We are actually, when we think we're giving subsidies, we are actually quite often giving it to the rich and not to the poor.
Yeah, most of the poor don't, but some of the urban poor do.
Okay.
It's where you don't have access that they don't get. But where there is access, you do get the part of the subsidy. But I do agree that subsidy on diesel should go. There's no reason for why that should be there. But having said that, we are, as far as petrol goes, almost paying international prices. I don't think we're too far off. And I will also reiterate that we will not get out of our dependence of fossil fuel in the next 20, 30 years. Absolutely. So if you think that renewables will replace everything, it won't. And the third thing that I would look at is that the way we look at costing, somehow we have the traditional sense of costing, and that changed during the opening show that one Mr. Patra, when he presented his microgrid system, where he looked at opportunity costing. What is the current payout by the people who are using fuel? What kind of fuel? It could be kerosene, it could be diesel, it could be firewood. And what is the cost of health, and what is the cost of keeping their environment clean? And he equated that to having microgrids, and he gives out a 150 rupee package, a 250 rupee package of solar energy, which to them has not increased their cash outflow, but has improved their whole ecosystem.
May I?
Yeah.
So, although, as was said, petrol may be nearing parity, but we've had a serious problem with diesel. And I think over the last few months, that's slowly going away. But I think there was a time where more than 50% of the cars being bought in this country were diesel, mainly because it still is. But I think as the diesel prices have gone up, the Indian buyer is very aware, and it is changing patterns, and that we still have a ways to go. And even for corporate users, I think putting on or switching on your diesel generating set was a very easy option, and it wasn't that expensive an option. And I think the increasing price of diesel, I find with industry, is forcing people to think about efficiency, about alternative sources. So it just isn't just about benefiting the rich at the expense of the poor. It actually distorts buying behavior across the range.
That's one of the Biroz.
One of the things I think which we don't see is process innovation. And the second thing, while collaboration at some level has started, like we see in this group right now, I think we need to take many more stakeholders into the fold, and therefore, at least where corporates are concerned, the supply chains seem to be kind of somehow out of their sort of realms of looking at things, except for a few more responsible or conscious corporates. I think, and this is where major amount of energy efficiency happens in the industry. So the SMEs are really struggling, the smaller kind of businesses are really struggling to kind of understand how they can bring about energy efficiency and therefore cost efficiency.
Can I just talk about a bit of the subsidy part?
Yeah.
I mean, while we talk about fossil fuel subsidies, since we're talking about efficiency, I think it's also important to talk about agriculture subsidy, because it has a huge impact on the fiscal situation of not just the central government but also the states. And I can give you examples of states where the agriculture consumption is about 40%. The agriculture subsidy outgo is a huge proportion of their fiscal deficit. And it goes to farmers. Nobody, I mean, and that's a huge, and because the power is free to the farmers, there is no incentive for him to invest in efficiency.
And actually the distortions which that kicks off are separate, because if you've got absolutely free power, you can run your DG set 24 hours a day. Sometimes you're pulling water, groundwater out more than you actually needed because you don't think it's actually a waste. And as a result of that, if you look at states like Punjab, groundwater is going down.
Yeah.
So the distortions that come in are sometimes one thing leads to another.
There is an opportunity also there. There's an investment opportunity there that if you can reduce the consumption, you can reduce the subsidy bill, and you can have the private sector come and invest in these efficient pump sets. So that's something I think needs a very strong focus from the government's point of view as far as agriculture subsidies are concerned.
Fair enough. Nena, industry.
There are two areas here. One is industry by itself, given energy shortage, let alone cost of energy, has a for-profit motive in reducing its own energy bill. So it's a given that where the capital cost of investment, say it has a 2 to 3 year payback, as long as it is explained, industry is that will adopt that technology. So I think providing that technology and the understanding therein, and I think it plays to the points made and on the demand side, is a big advantage. But the other is regulation too, that if you look at buildings, for example, we do actually have building code regulations which are, halfway decent. The issue then is, why do we not get adequate compliance to that? Why can we not ensure that our buildings, which are amongst the biggest users of energy, all work to a minimum standard which saves us as a country? And I think it goes then to the whole area of skill and skilling. Do we have enough auditors? Does it have to be government auditors? Can it not be outsourced? Should not every company have to disclose what it's doing in the space? So the whole area of regulation and transparency and disclosure needs a step change. And I don't think it's difficult if we embark on that journey. A related area around regulation is what we did in appliances. And BEE did a fantastic job in aiding and abetting a process which ensured that, say, all air conditioners were star rated. The buyer, the purchaser began to know what they were buying. And people migrate very quickly to something which is energy efficient, provided you provide the data.
Because there is also a self-benefit. If it's energy efficient, your electricity bills are actually going up. Let me just get some voices in from the audience and, John, why don't I just get your take on how do countries in Europe deal with this or abroad?
In the European Union, we have implemented an emission trading system. It's a cap and trade system where companies, they are allowed to trade amongst each other, and they have to have a quote to emit carbon in the atmosphere. What this does is that it stimulates innovation because there will be a healthy competition among the companies on how to reduce emission of carbon dioxide the most efficiently. So that is definitely a driver for innovating and for reducing carbon dioxide. Another thing that the European Union has done is that it has adopted a 2020 policy framework having to do with the fact that we are trying to reduce carbon dioxide emissions with 20% in 2020 We're trying to improve energy efficiency with 20% in 2020. And finally, we are trying to increase the use of renewables to 20% of the energy mix in 2020. What this does is that it provides a credible framework for investors. So investors, if the policy long-term framework is not there, they'll go away. But if they believe in the fact that there is the political will to do a dramatic green transition, we will also see the investments flowing also in the industrial sector.
All right, that's interesting. Who would like to take that, whether that's a possibility?
Well, I just wanted to add one more issue on industry that we as an organization, and we have Rohan here from Infosys is involved, in terms of trying to change buyer behavior in industry. So for the first time in Bangalore, a group called the Green Power Buyers Group has been instituted, where they've got together companies who go up to the distribution company and say, look, we buy power from you, but we want to buy green power from you. So that actually creates a demand pull and a pressure on the distribution company to actually source its power from acceptable sources. So I think that's a great example, and that's moving from the Bangalore, Karnataka area across the country. And it's a great example of how industry can actually change their own behavior and influence the electricity distribution companies as well.
Okay.
We have to look at two aspects of industry. One is the hard part, which Nana talked about. This country is going to focus on manufacturing. In next 20 to 30 years, maybe we will double or triple our manufacturing. So we need to have standards which will reflect global best practices. And that's where regulations comes into picture. So we have a energy market scheme of Bureau of Energy Efficiency. These are early days. We don't know how it is going to perform. But we need to have standards which will reflect global best practice for any new coming industry. Then there is softer side, which is market, which is incentives, which is skill building. And I think Nana is right on the spot when she talks about knowledge and skill in making sure that new technology, better management systems are there in industry. A lot of industries don't know what is available in the market, where the payback period is much smaller. So information skill is going to be as important as regulation in making transition in the energy sector, industry sector.
You know, Bharat, I guess a lot of industry would also say that part of the reason why we are energy inefficient is also the fault of the system and the government and things like that. For example, where you being really inefficient in setting up these DG sets and generating our own electricity at a huge environmental cost and a cost to ourselves, and it's not an efficient way of doing things. But that's because we don't get guaranteed and secure energy from the grid. So if the government would do its job, we would be far more efficient.
Well, yes. I mean, we finally kind of talk about the government and that, but it is, I don't know, I honestly don't have an answer.
Despite that, there's a lot they can do?
Sorry?
You mean despite whatever the government is doing, there's a lot that industry can still do?
It is, I think so. I think we need to really look inwards as well. I'm not saying we have, we can. So government will do its job,
but industry should not take that as an excuse not to step up to the
That's
plate.
what I feel.
Okay.
As far as industry goes, if you see consumption of power, it's almost one-third, one-third, one-third. One-third human consumption in terms of homes, etc., one-third industry, one-third agriculture. Okay, give or take a few percentage points this way, that way. But industry is the favorite whipping boy. It almost subsidizes all the rest.
Okay. You're nodding your head in agreement.
Yeah, I do. Because the industrial tariffs are perhaps the highest you see. But coming back to the regulatory framework, we do have a regulatory framework in place for large industries. And it's a combination of targets set for energy efficiency. Also, it provides incentive for overachieving that incentive, because there's a market-based instrument which has been created, which is called the Perform, Achieve and Trade mechanism. The first cycle will be completed in March 2015, and hopefully we will have a market for trading these certificates. But as someone said, that for small industries, we really need a very different intervention. There, all these issues of soft skills, of actually hand-holding these people, finding out the technology is completely different from a large industry perspective. So that's something we need to bear in mind, that the two interventions can't be same.
All right. Then I'll turn to Mary.
On the same point, I don't think there is resistance from the small scale. I remember when we conducted sessions at FICCI for the SME sectors on energy efficiency, I mean, there wasn't even room to accommodate all that signed up. They really, for them it's a cost. And for everyone to reduce the cost of a very important input for them is a given. Showing the way is what is the issue.
Absolutely.
And can we help handhold them, exactly as you said.
Most of these energy efficient projects are either small and they are not bankable. So they don't get any specific support saying, okay, this is an energy efficient product, the banks would look at it in a different fashion. And that's one of the problems, not only for small and medium, it's impossible for them to get money. What do you think a small and medium guy does? Most of his time he's with the bankers, trying to get his normal working capital. Where is the time for him to look at energy efficiency? And neither does he have the wherewithal. So we need to get together, and even the large industries are finding it difficult to say, okay, give us a separate ESCO fund.
So let's turn to some of the innovative financing methods that are also possible, and in buildings in particular that's coming up. But let me just go to, we do have Dr. Jain with us as well, Chairman IGBC at CII. So what can industry do, and buildings in particular is one of the areas that I think many in industry have started to say, if we can make our buildings a bit more energy efficient, that's where a big start can be made.
Our assessment for India is that buildings alone consume about 40% of the energy that the nation consumes. It's a low-hanging fruit. It's very easy for me to get that 40% down by quantum. I represent the Indian Green Building Council. We started our journey with only 20,000 square feet. Today we are sitting about 200 crore square feet, Vikram, and the idea is these buildings will demonstrate energy saving anywhere from 20 to 50%. As Nanaji rightly said, the important thing is that we must have regulation. We have already regulation. We have NBC, ECBC, but not implemented. They are not mandatory. My suggestion to the government will be, make it mandatory. Any violation, punishable.
And are those buildings far more expensive to build in the first place?
No, they are not. They were initially more expensive. Now the difference has come down to 2%.
This entire incentive scheme in building sector, two things, lacks transparency. And that points need to be put on table right now. That you have now a whole series of builders who claim themselves to be energy efficient and certification schemes, but there is no transparency in terms of how much energy efficiency they are gaining.
So it has to be carefully monitored, you know, to make sure those are really...
One is that. Second is, you are going to implement energy conservation building code. First of all, it is half good, as Nana said. We need to improve it much more to suit our climate. Okay. It can only be implemented if municipalities are empowered and their capacities are built. At the end of the day, National Building Code, which is the prime code for building in this country, is implemented by municipalities. It cannot be implemented from Delhi. So you have from class 2 cities to, class 4 cities, which are going to grow. You must have better municipal understanding on energy conservation in building. If you are not able to do that, all the talk about energy efficiency in building and green building will go bust. Okay. So we have to go to the ground.
As if we're now being joined by Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. So great to get you and a sense of, there must be some buzz, I guess, in the government in general, new governments in place, a lot of action taking place to try and encourage energy efficiency. Is that going to be a clear priority area from what you're seeing?
Energy efficiency has huge benefits, fiscal benefits as well as energy benefits, which provide an additional benefit to the user as well as to the country. Now, as far as buildings is concerned, we need to ensure that every state adopts the energy conservation building code as soon as possible. After all, buildings is a municipal or a state subject, and while the Government of India has issued the code, its enforcement has to be made mandatory by the states. What we are doing is creating a cadre of certified professionals. These are all in the private sector, and they will do two things. First, they will sign off on a building design before it is submitted to the municipality, certifying that it is compliant with the code. So just as you get a structural engineer to sign off for safety or a fire person to sign off for fire safety, there would be a certified building energy professional who will sign off for ECBC compliance. And then the second step is, once the building is constructed, one of these people will go ahead and sign off that the building that has been constructed is in compliance with the design that was approved. So we believe that this would create a system in which there would be enforcement without too much intrusiveness and a system that is widely available for everybody. But I think the key issue is to get as many states as possible. Today 7 have notified it. We need to make sure that all of them notify it as soon as possible.
All right. Millie, can I just turn to you? Terry, one of the companies which actually put in a green building, at that time was it far more expensive to put up than a normal building would have been, and are you now seeing lots of cost benefits?
Certainly there is a dip in the price, but I would like to comment, and in continuation with Dr. Mathur has just mentioned, if you really look at the Energy Conservation Building Code and the purview of the EC Act under which the ECBC has been implemented, it addresses buildings over 100 kilowatt and does not address residential buildings in particular. And if you really look at the electricity consumption in building sector in India, of the 32% of electricity consumption, 8% is on account of commercial building, remaining 24% is residential. So the code doesn't capture the efficiency parameters, and the code alone, it should be implemented with the right intent. And what we feel is that in addition to the code, you should adopt an integrated approach to design. The code does not tell you how well you can design a building so that your demand is minimized. So an integrated approach to a building design, which can be facilitated through a good architectural practice, has to be introduced.
Okay, right. Sir, can I just get you in on that note? Also the financing of it. Now these new financial instruments in a sense are available, things like escrow, which to lay people out there, essentially from whatever I've understood about them, it means that somebody else comes in, makes everything efficient, and you pay for that with the savings that you generate. So there's no capital outfront.
Absolutely.
How does that work, and is that really something which we should then publicize a lot?
Yeah, exactly. And particularly while all the talk of the code is for the new buildings, we must also realize there's a significant stock of existing buildings. And that is where the ESCO model of financing, if you go to the Yojana Bhavan building, the Planning Commission building, that's the first building in Delhi central government which we have helped made it a 5-star building. So we have reduced their consumption by 30%. We have paid all the money upfront, and we are getting paid over a 4-year period through savings in energy.
Dr. Mathur, let me come back to you on that. Ever since these energy standards started to be mentioned, we've seen this on individual behavior. People are starting to buy more energy efficient air conditioners or heaters or whatever the appliances are, fridges, and now it's starting to happen in buildings as well. Not for altruistic reasons, although that's one of it, but also because it's better for them, it's cheaper. Eventually their long-term savings. And in buildings, if they can pay for it once they recognize the savings, they'll be more incentivized to do that.
At the end of the day, the label is accompanied by a large outreach program that tells you and I of the money savings that we do. Now, one of the things that we have learned is that there is at least 2 kinds of people, one for whom this is money savings, and for others for whom it is a matter of lifestyle. And we need to make sure that the certificate and the outreach program that goes with it meets the needs of both of these segments. At the end of the day, therefore, a credible mechanism for check testing is important. So what we do is we pick up appliances from the market, send them for testing, and make sure that the way they are performing is as is declared on the label. At the end of the day, that is the only credible way of ensuring that the consumer is getting the savings for which she is paying.
In respect to what Ajay, Millie and Saurabh said, one thing, I must congratulate you on advertising in the paper saying that these 3 are not meeting and naming them very well. That would push a lot of people to ensure that they really walk the talk. There was an advertisement from BE saying that these products from these companies are not meeting. The other thing that I wanted to say is that we don't have very good measurement and verification protocols in this country. We're just starting out. Without measurement and verification, you will never be able to improve. So what we need to do is to set those protocols for India. We could start with somebody else's protocol as an inspiration, but we need India-based protocols. We need to do the work on that.
Transport sector. That's another major area of concern. Now, obviously, when it comes to buildings, there are other aspects that are said that 70% of all the buildings that will ever come up in India are yet to be built, so it's really important. I hope that's not necessarily the case with cars and vehicles, but who knows, it's possible. In which case, you have to build a lot more roads and then really worry about that.
Yes, actually, the way the transport is panning out, it's greatly aspirational. People want personal transport. Transport companies, to a point, do a lot of work on energy efficiency, fuel efficiency, etc. But it's in the use phase that one doesn't have any control on. So this is one area which really needs to be addressed. But the other thing is technology, and we have, we have tried, especially electric vehicles. But here is where we've really not been able to make that much impact because of lack of subsidy on this, because it was the first time that technological innovation happened. And we couldn't, and that's really a pity.
Transport, I think the points being made on technology and the actual vehicles is very valid, but we need to go beyond that also in terms of design and planning our cities.
Let me get some more views from the audience. Deepa, yeah.
In buildings, the area that I focus on, measurement and verification is a very important thing for buildings, and as we focus on codes and implementation, that becomes a very critical component that needs to be put in place.
All right, Rohan, can I get you in? You head green initiatives at Infosys, so what can companies do on any of these fronts or more? And any other recommendations you may have for the government?
We took this approach 7 years ago, and we've seen that investing in efficiency is very, very profitable. Over the last 6 years, our employee strength has doubled, but our energy increase has been only 13% in absolute terms. So you can see how profitable it is.
Perhaps that's something, you can actually, more and more companies are going to start taking those examples, I hope.
Most of the builder developers are now making green building because of this slight incentive and better utilization by the user.
Transport.
There's one area which we are neglecting. There are 76 ports in India. Why are we not using coastal shipping?
Well, I believe the new government is also talking about using rivers. River transport may be one way.
Because that would be perhaps the most inexpensive way of transportation.
Okay.
The first thing first, let's talk about efficiency and walk the talk, get the fuel efficiency standard in place. Point number 2, I think we have to make private mobility expensive. Right now the car ownership in this city is less than 50 cars per 1,000 people. Then it is a crawling city. Suppose it increases European level, then we will be a gridlocked city. We can't move.
The slight issue with that is, of course, that it's one thing to say let's discourage private ownership of vehicles. But the flip side of that is you should have really good public transport.
Of course, that's the next.
How many cities have that? Okay, Delhi's got a metro, but how many cities in India have?
I think this government should have a 1 million bus program. I think if you want to give a suggestion to this government, say metro in all city and a 1 million bus program.
But even where countries where they have this thing,
it's very expensive to drive.
Yeah, but then people still buy cars because they want to own it. So it's very difficult to go ahead and say.
You can buy car, you can own car, keep it in the garage. Okay, let's say that. Okay, if you really want to buy car, it's a status symbol. So it's a sector with maximum co-benefit if we get it right.
Not as if by doing this, the the car companies are going to out of business, really, if they are kind of forward thinking. So there are a lot of areas where, automobile companies can chip in and make cities a better place to live.
Right. I want to now just turn very quickly to getting each of you maybe to help me sum up what we have discussed and try and come with some key recommendations that you think the government should act on. But before I do that, Dr. Mathur, perhaps if you could just summarize for us some of the thinking right now as far as you've gathered, what is it that you think India can and should do? That very briefly, there's 2 or 3 points that we should really be focusing on to crack the energy code.
There are 3 things that I'd like to focus on. One is buildings. We need to ensure that at least as far as commercial buildings is concerned, where there's huge growth, where there is huge air conditioning, we bring the energy conservation building code into mandatory effect as soon as possible. We need to ensure that electricity distribution companies start promoting demand side management. Just as they sell electricity, they should pay for saving electricity as well. And the third issue, which hasn't been addressed, is that of promoting innovation. Innovation in technologies, innovation in operating practices, and innovation in business models.
All right, those are some excellent suggestions. Now please feel free to add to that or just summarize 3 points, takeaways if you like, that assuming Mr. Modi and Piyush Goyal and everyone else is watching this, that they should keep in mind?
Well, let me take a stab at adding, and I think we should definitely focus on the skill building. That you didn't mention that. The skill building around enforcement is key. I think if we can build on the skill building, even say as a tenant in a building, I would have a requirement where as a tenant I bring in these professionals who then certify that the building as it was originally set out to do is performing at a certain level. So I as a tenant become part of the certification process, and it's ongoing because I have a demand on a builder to do it. The other, which we tend to again look at buildings and transport in silos. This great combination of ministries that has happened in bringing renewables into the whole power ministry is great. Okay. Likewise, building and transportation, to see the two together is a huge opportunity, because we should be living closer to where we work. We should have no need to take long journeys, and in doing those journeys, of course, use public transportation with last mile connectivity.
Focus on demand side, and by that I'm saying give targets to the, let's say, distribution utility, that for this year you will reduce your consumption by, let's say, 5% using energy efficiency. China has created a market of a few $1 billion simply by providing these targets and monitoring them. So I think that's something which is a must at this point in time. It will solve a large number of issues of financing, of getting the technologies, getting the innovation, and dealing with all the sectors.
I'm just going to a few micro-level policies. One is accelerated depreciation for energy-efficient equipment, even if they're run on fossil fuel. We give it only for renewable energy now. Perhaps lower duties. Okay. That's one. Two, metering of all free connections. Meter it, give them free for all that you want. But if you don't know what you're consuming, how are you going to improve? That's one. And three, in the larger sense of things, I think this country needs distributed generation of power. And if you look at renewable energy like solar or wind, if you go into the villages and you start generating them there and uplink them, you would probably do far better than having centralized power plants and taking miles of lines and having transmission distribution losses. You get villages off the grid for both power and water.
Distributed generation, fine, that's a great idea.
So yeah, I would echo the importance of access. I think the point was made. We have hundreds of millions of people who don't have access. I think distributed generation is a very effective way of getting there. But I would also like to position efficiency for the lower income groups. I think if you can get appliances like budget lamps or super efficient fans, the cost of energies are going up, and I think, as we've seen in some recent elections, even in Delhi, the common man is really suffering from an increasing cost of electricity, which is the real cost, and we really need to make life affordable for the individual.
All right, let me quick, before I come to the three of you, any recommendations, one recommendation that you might have, John?
I would say long-term targets to promote confidence in the fact that energy efficiency is on the political agenda also in the long run. Another thing that has also been mentioned is to set ambitious energy efficiency standards for product categories. In the field of pumps, there are tremendous potential for reducing the energy use without compromising comfort, etc. So that would be my two recommendations.
Two things, Vikram. One is the mandate that the NBC, ECBC are followed, not recommendatory but mandatory. Yeah. Number two, incentivize the high performance buildings.
Rohan, you had a recommendation.
Like we have RPOs for utilities, we should have certain percentage of large industries buying from renewable sources. Maybe 5% of all energy of large industry should come from renewable sources.
Today, a cell phone company sends me an SMS if I'm at 80% of my data limit. Can the same thing be done? As a user, I don't even know how much I'm consuming till the bill comes. Some ways that utility companies can become more innovative to incentivize users to save energy as well.
Okay, Samit from Greenpeace, let me see if you have a recommendation.
We are still not talking about looking and re-looking at the entire paradigm of energy, the way it is generated in this country today. You know, we have a very flawed, centralized, fossil fuel-based energy system, which, by the way, we are talking about the middle class, and we're talking about air conditioners and cars. I mean, if 300 million is the middle class in this country, we also have more than 300 million people in this country who do not have access to electricity at all. Right? So I think we have to look at this at the fundamental end, at the paradigm end, and use the opportunity for us, because the climate crisis is a big one, and use the opportunity to re-look at the entire paradigm of energy in this country, which is inverted from what the current model is.
All right, Millie, your 2-3 recommendations.
2 big things, I think innovative financing can play a major role. While we are talking about supply side efficiency, demand side responses, the banks, the lending institutions can play a major role. And the other thing which I feel strongly is there should be penalties and incentives for people who are committing to perform and then not performing. So transparency in reporting and disincentives also should be put in place.
Penalties must be in place.
An integrated energy policy to give a long-term direction in which way this country is going to move. We need urgently an integrated energy policy. Number 2, distributed decentralized generation for energy access based on renewable energy. And point number 3, we need to look at our energy security much more clearly. We are importing 40% of commercial energy, is making a huge hole in our finances.
All right.
I think PAT is somewhere kind of dragging its feet. It's not come out the way it should have, and I think the government should look at PAT in a big way, and that's what you could really get a huge leap in efficiencies.
All right, Dr. Mathavaranda, I give the last thought on this particular program to you. If you had to make a note to yourself every morning or in the evening, 1 recommendation or 2 recommendations that you think would be perhaps the most crucial.
At the end of the day, I think what is important is that you and I, whether in our homes, offices or industries, the decisions that we make help save energy. So what would do that? One has been said many times is credible information. So one of the things that goes across the board, whether it's building, industry, appliances, is ensure that there is credible, transparent information. Second, there's been a lot of talk of monitoring and verification. Yes, we need to do that, but without the costs becoming very excessive. The best is that, in a sense, we have many forms of commoditized energy efficiency solutions, which you and I accept because we know that they work. We have done that in the past. We will do it again. And the third is, I'll pick up on the issue of financing. There are too many bank managers who are uncomfortable in figuring out risks associated with energy financing. I think that's an area that needs a huge amount of effort, which has not happened.
All right, so I think we actually have come up with such a range of interesting, possibilities and recommendations that we probably will send a DVD of this across to the minister and to everyone else concerned. I'm sure they will find many of the suggestions really helpful. Thank you all so much for joining us, and some very interesting ideas of what we can do. If we start making an impact on any of these, we get some of these recommendations actually out there, we get them implemented, I think then India can really start to crack the energy code. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now.